This week, Richard Moulds from Whitewood Security joins us to talk about entropy and other things related to, I'll term it as math, since encryption wasn't a big no one was a big fan of that term, which is awesome. Math is great. Larry Pesce has prepared a sexy technical segment on editing packets, I'm told, which would be awesome as well. In the stories, the Fappening 2017, more celebrity nude photos, which of course somehow we always end up having to talk about, they are leaked online. A company offers $500,000 for a zero-day vulnerability in their products, and it'll surprise you, maybe not surprise you, as to what that company does. Beware of a virus spreading through Facebook Messenger. I see these all the time. AWS, of course, is the file hosting service S3. Leaks documents. We'll talk about that. Integrating security with DevOps. A racist television company. All that and more on this edition of Paul's Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly. For security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. I'm, of course, your host, Paul Asadorian. Excited to be here, as always, on Paul's Security Weekly.
Hi, and welcome to the show. I totally introduced our host right now, but I've got a totally awkward boner.
What? Where? Oh, hey! I'm in the studio with you guys. That's kind of cool.
Sounds like a plan.
And we'll at least have one person listening.
That's right. Just saying.
Yeah, I know, and I appreciate it, and I'm glad you enjoyed your spooning with Jeff. But you know,
hey, that's
actually built a new office.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, third baby on the way, so I needed a new office.
Nice.
I lost my old office. That's now the baby room.
Brought to you by IT Pro TV is the resource to keep you and your IT team's skills up to date. IT Pro TV's team solution provides group pricing and access to their supervisor portal. You'll gain full control over your team's training schedule, see individual and group analytics, and more. IT Pro TV does IT live every day, so you know you're getting the most current IT training. Go to itpro.tv/Security Weekly and use the code SW30 to try it free for 7 days and receive 30% off your monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription. To learn more about IT Pro TV's team solution, sign up for a free demo of their supervisor portal. Logarithm's Netmon Freemium delivers real-time network visibility to quickly identify emerging threats in your IT environment. Netmon Freemium is a free commercial-grade network forensics and traffic analytics solution. You can use Netmon Freemium's powerful capabilities to search against all observed network traffic, identify abnormal traffic patterns and application usage, and quickly analyze full packet captures. Take the first step towards real-time network visibility. Visit logarithm.com/freemium to learn more and download it today. NetSparker, the developers of desktop and cloud-based web application security scanners that enable you to automatically identify vulnerabilities in your web applications and web services. NetSparker scanners employ a unique and dead-accurate vulnerability scanning engine that automatically verifies vulnerabilities with their proof of concept. For more information, visit them on the web at netsparker.com or email at contact@netsparker.com.
And howdy, friends. Welcome to the show. Let me introduce you to a man that does 100 on the highway. And if you do the speed limit, you best get out of the way. Mr. Paul Asadorian.
Welcome, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. I thought for sure there was going to be something about laptop destruction.
No.
Inadvertent laptop destruction. You missed it. Before the show, I completely destroyed Jeff's laptop. And I like, wasn't even the same general vicinity. It was like a Rube Goldberg machine. What is that called?
Yes.
Yeah. Rube Goldberg machine.
Yep.
I was like sawzalling a piece of the wall to fit something on a new set, and pretty much like 10 feet away, there was a cigar box on the top of the wall.
A very big,
very large
cigar box.
Heavy cigar box, and it fell right on Jeff's laptop. It just solidifies my skill in laptop destruction.
A moment of silence for my laptop.
For your laptop, yes. Cheers. We made tiki drinks tonight as well. Well, I made tiki drinks tonight. It's supposed to be blue. It looks green. It's supposed to be a blue Hawaiian.
It's blue enough.
It's a bluish-green Hawaiian. And it's good. I mean, it has booze in it. I'm refining my craft. With me here in studio, owning one less laptop today, Mr. Jeff Mann. Jeff, welcome to the show.
It was such a great opportunity to be here in studio today.
And it was such a great laptop.
Up to about an hour ago.
You'll miss it
just
forever.
a good laptop.
Just think, Jeff, I gave you the perfect excuse to go buy a new laptop.
You did. What's my budget?
We discussed this earlier, Jeff.
Yes. Okay. We'll work it out.
I have a new laptop, and I'm like, I will order 2, okay?
All right.
Mr. Larry Pesce is here in studio, who's throwing his laptop underneath the cigar box as we speak.
I'm waiting for you to break my laptop. Yeah. And heck, all I want is the old broken one so I can replace my damn screen. Jeez.
What, that MacBook over there?
Yeah.
Oh, just take it. It's already busted.
It's an identical screen to mine. Mine's all messed up because I dropped it.
Just swap the screens on it.
Yeah. I'll take that one, swap the screens, and give you set dressing.
The battery exploded in that.
I know it did.
It's bad.
Yeah.
Another laptop that I destroyed.
I'll dispose of the battery for you. How's that?
Thank you. There you go. Okay. Larry, welcome. Glad to have you here on the show. On the lines via Skype, Mr. Joff Thayer is here with us. Joff, welcome to the show.
G'day, Paul. How are you? Look, I tell you, between cocktails going into keyboards and physical destruction, I think we've got the laptop killing process just completely perfected.
Oh, yeah. Joff, you don't even need my help to destroy laptops in the studio. You did that all on your own.
That's right. We call that a forced upgrade situation.
I think now, in studio, Larry, have you lost a laptop on set? Destroyed a laptop on set?
We've been close. It was someone spilled beer in my laptop at Sands many years ago, but it got saved.
And like a key didn't work on it or something?
Nope, it all worked.
Oh.
It all worked. Yours was the one that had the keys that didn't work.
Yes.
When beer got spilled into it.
Yes, I spilled my own beer into it. So
Someone
we've all
spilled
had
my beer.
laptops pretty much almost destroyed.
Other than being in good company, this isn't making me feel better.
That's why I got a nice disposable little Chromebook here that I use.
And you're very generously letting me use another Chromebook.
Another Chromebook, yes.
From the studio.
I have. I can't do the. Anyway, we'll talk about that after. Our special guest, who thankfully didn't bring a laptop for us to destroy, Richard Moulds is here from Whitewood Security. Richard, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul. It's a good job I didn't bring my laptop by the sounds of it.
Yes, because apparently there's a special skill.
This is like a danger zone.
It is.
We did manage to leave the thermite at home today, however.
We have destroyed laptops with thermites, potato cannons. Anyway.
I was going to say I left my thermite in my other shorts, but you sent those to a listener apparently.
Yes. You're wearing anyway. The same shorts, Larry. So are those your Thursday shorts? Does it say Thursday on the tag on the inside?
It does.
Okay. Richard, how did you get your start in information security?
I used to be in the video conferencing industry.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that
making
explains
video
it.
phones, and it was next year was always the year of video phones. Mm-hmm. It was only when there was a war did it sort of boost the market. Remember the Iraq war? But I figured security, there was always going to be a market for security.
So, Richard, I'm just curious. What, other than the smartphone, what were some of the things that kept killing the video phone? Was it just there wasn't an adoption for it, and then the smartphone came out?
I thought radio killed the video phone.
Yeah.
This is like back in the 80s, right? When there was no internet. Remember the switch 56 circuits? You'd aggregate these things together to try and get enough bandwidth to send a few bits. So, you'd be selling boardroom to boardroom systems. You had $100,000 studios, and the CEO would come in and say, "Why is this picture worse than my TV at home?"
Yeah.
And you could never, ever really explain to somebody why that would be so. Sufficiently well.
Right. So where did you go from there?
Encryption. Yeah, 20 years.
Or the next logical step.
20 years ago. Well, the thing, I built encryption systems for video conferencing because if you had an E1 line between New York and London, somebody hacked into it. Bingo, they got the entire board meeting. So encryption was always a big deal in video conferencing. And I ended up working for a crypto startup in Cambridge in England, building hardware security modules, key management stuff. And that was it, really. It's really elegant technology. It's math, It's pretty cool.
It's never wrong.
It's different than most of the security. I thought, you joke that if you're in the crypto business, you tend to assume that all other security fails. You know, the whole goal is making the data useless when it gets stolen, not if it gets stolen. So
When, not if.
exactly, yeah. So we sort of assume that the data is just going to get ripped off at some point. Now, how can you make it as painless as possible? Of course, that now translates into ransomware, where the whole thing's been flipped on its head.
Right, right. Now, you spent some time here in Rhode Island. Is that correct?
Yeah, 10 years.
Was that when you were working for Whitewood or before that?
In video conferencing.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a little networking business called Prompters Communications down in Portsmouth, Rhode Island, near Newport. And my company, which was called Video Server, acquired it, and I came along to run it. That was 20 years ago, and I came over on a 2-year deal. So I'm still here.
And now you're based in Massachusetts. Is that correct? Is that where you live today?
Yeah. We're based in Boston.
So what does Whitewood do, and what do you do for Whitewood? Whitewood.
Whitewood.
That's two different things, Paul.
I had the pleasure of running Whitewood. We're in the quantum crypto business. So if you think crypto is cool, then quantum crypto is even cooler. And the first thing we've built is an entropy source, which most people either have no idea what the hell that is, or run for the covers when they hear about it. We try and make sure that crypto actually works properly, because crypto revolves around random numbers. If keys start to become predictable, then crypto is a waste of time, pretty much. So you start digging into the math about, well, where do these numbers come from, and how do we know they're random? And there's not much of a story in many cases. It's a bit of a dirty little secret of crypto. It's all the OS does its job as best it can to make a random number.
Right. I mean, dev random is completely random, right?
Well, it's got random in the name, so it must be, right?
Right. Exactly.
It looks random.
Dev U random is like unrandom, probably. Not quite, but anyway.
Well, in a pseudo sense.
In a pseudo sense.
But you don't need a pseudo to run it. I can't believe I just said that.
That's a really funny
NIST even referred to these things as deterministic random bit generators, which sounds like a real oxymoron.
Yeah.
So what is the use case for entropy? Like, why do I need more entropy?
Because you want to make keys that can't be guessed.
But doesn't my computer generate enough entropy for me in order to do that? I mean, there's so many different sources.
It does a great job. You can just repeat it.
That's
Well, your computer does a reasonable job, yeah, because particularly by the sounds of it, your computer has a fairly boyish life. So, it's generating probably quite.
My computer used to generate great entropy.
So computers have these algorithms called pseudorandom number generators that make random numbers for all of the applications. But these things are just algorithms. Software in itself can't do something random. If software does something random, we call it a bug. We don't tend to call it a feature. So your computer tries to scalp random stuff from the hardware. Clicks on the keyboard, clicks on the mouse, network traffic, even jitter in the CPU, how long it takes to find stuff on the hard drive, that sort of thing, which is okay, and that's how it's been for 20 years. But when you virtualize something, you go to a virtual machine or a container sat in the cloud somewhere where there's no hard drive and there's no user and there's no keyboard and there's no mouse. There's nothing really going on. Cloud providers want to make their systems as sterile as possible. They don't want weird, random, crazy stuff going on. They want it to be as predictable as possible. So there's not a lot of entropy in the cloud, and worse still, to make the cloud sort of do cloud-like things, we like to copy applications. We like to take 100 copies from our golden image and just stand them all up and tear them all down and stand them all back up again. When we do that, of course, we're copying whatever entropy had been gathered, and we're copying the state of the random number generators in those systems. So we've now got 100 synchronized random number generators that we now want to desynchronize, but unfortunately there's no entropy, so we don't get much of a chance to desynchronize them. And if you can figure out that's going on, you can start to figure out what the keys are. This doesn't make the keys just simple and obvious, but it certainly cuts down the guessing space of an attacker from something that's infeasible to something that starts to become practical. And that's the whole point of crypto. Crypto revolves around secrecy. It revolves around the idea that if you've got a fastest computer on the planet and you've got a million years to play with it, you still could never get the keys. As soon as that presumption starts to fall away, crypto's done. It's not like most security, it's sort of shades of grey. Crypto's either on or off, pretty much. Data's either encryptable or decryptable or it's not. A signature either validates or it doesn't.
Yeah, I think some people have a view of encryption that's like, well, if the NSA really wanted my stuff, like they could probably get it. Is that we have Jeff and Joff and Richard and Larry and myself here on the show. In your opinions, like is that true? Like, are people their concerns about crypto like, oh well, I've done my due diligence, my computer's random enough. Like, if the NSA really wants my stuff, they can get it, even if I encrypt it using what I have available to me today. Is that true, or like where do we stand on crypto holding up to some of the brute forcing attacks?
Are you asking any of us?
Any of us. Some of us that may have worked for a 3-letter government agency before.
Well, I'll start. And this has no relation to my previous employment, but classic machine-generated crypto systems, machine-generated random, is always at some level computationally solvable. So 20, 30 years ago, even going back to World War II and the Enigma machine, the idea was make it so complex that it's either not breakable in a reasonable amount of time with the available resources, or just make it too damn costly to be able to spend the time. In the old days, there were when we were designing crypto systems, we would actually estimate how long the crypto was good for based on whatever machine-generated algorithms and random we were
Moore's law
working with. So the idea of introducing pure random that is not predictable, that's not generated in any way, shape, or form in a way that can be reproduced, which is what most of the computer public internet industry has been attempting over the last 20, 25 years, that's a big deal, because you can, there is no such thing as brute forcing. It's like a one-time pad.
Right.
If it's pure random and you're using it only once, it'll decrypt to anything. So, there's no way to cryptographically figure out if you've got the right answer or not. The same would be the case now, only you're talking, millions and billions of bytes of key, and the algorithms are much more complex and faster, rather than a few hundred or 1,000 printed on a page that you're encrypting manually. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So to answer your question, NSA could have conceivably, if it's a machine-generated, pseudo-created type of algorithm using any kind of generated random, yes, it's computationally feasible to break it. So if the key is completely random, then you can try as long as you want. You're not going to break it.
Richard.
Yeah. I have a comment.
Go, Jeff.
Go ahead, Jeff. Sorry.
So a lot of people don't realize in most modern cryptographic implementations that you're not just talking about a symmetric key algorithm in most cases, right? I mean, you look at the advanced encryption standard, it's a solid block cipher symmetric key algorithm, but the issue is kind of twofold. Not only does the symmetric key have to be generated, but it has to be exchanged as well. So there's another half of the equation, and that's where Diffie-Hellman has come in a lot of cases historically for key exchange. Key exchange is a completely separate algorithm that's running, that's dependent on large prime numbers, and the fact that those things are computationally not solvable as well to exchange the key securely, in other words, reversing that prime number equation. With the advent of quantum computing, that becomes more feasible than it has before, and so we do see this evolution towards. You've seen elliptic curve cryptography arise that reduces the exponentiation algorithms down to an additive algorithm to deal with the computational complexity overheads, as well as to make things stronger. So, it sort of factors back into what Jeff was saying. These things are all mathematics that's potentially solvable as computation power increases. The ability to brute force and solve them is always going to be on the increase. and thus the algorithms have to evolve. And then, back full circle to Richard, the big weak point, obviously, is how effectively you can generate random numbers to actually kick off initialization vectors and seed these algorithms, which is a very, very big deal because you don't want to be predictable in any sense.
Richard, I wanted to, for our audience, explore the quantum aspect that you talked about. So what is quantum cryptography? What problems is it trying to solve?
Sure. Well, picking up on Geoff's point, quantum cryptography is trying to deal with the threat of quantum computers. So quantum computers that don't really exist yet, and little tiny ones exist here and there, and we can probably guess where they exist. Mm-hmm. Quantum computers can run something called Shor's algorithm, which was postulated 50, 60 years ago by Shor, and you can't run it on a classical computer, not even your computer. What's nice about Shor's algorithm is it can calculate directly a private key from a public key. So it can break the asymmetric crypto we were just talking about, which is used to share keys. It can't break symmetric crypto, so AES is an example of symmetric algorithm, got a shared common private key. Quantum computing can't really damage that, but it can damage asymmetric cryptography. Now, asymmetric cryptography is sort of used for everything. It's used for the key exchange we just talked about, which is therefore used to set up internet encryption, IoT security, anything to do with PKI, anything to do with signatures, anything to do with certificates, smart card authentication, all that stuff is public key, asymmetric crypto, and quantum computing breaks that overnight. So depends when you think quantum computers are going to show up. Most people 5 years ago thought quantum computers were 50 years away. This wasn't something that we would have to worry about. Our kids would worry about quantum computers, but we'd be long gone, not our problem. And then 18 months or so, NSA came out and said, these quantum computers, they might show up within 8 years or so. And that's a problem because it takes 10 years to sort out a new algorithm. So we do need a new algorithm to prevent attack from quantum computers. If that takes 10 years, we're already sort of late. And you could argue coming up with the algorithm to protect against quantum computers might take even longer than it did last time because we haven't got a computer to test it against.
Now, Richard, for our listeners who are newer to security, explain what a quantum computer is and how it relates to cryptography.
So quantum computers are cool because they're not bounded by ones and zeros. So things don't just exist in one of two states. They can exist in multiple states. This is the whole uncertainty principle, which means quantum computers operate in a fundamentally different way, and they can execute instructions in a fundamentally different way, which is why they can execute this thing called Shor's algorithm. So quantum computers will require whole new computing languages and a whole new branch of computer science and open up some really cool stuff. But the reason why they're interesting from a security sense is because they can break crypto. So the question is, how do you fight against that? And what we're experiencing is a race between the mathematicians and the physicists, basically. Right? Mathematicians.
That's always a fun concept.
just visualizing that in my head.
Neither are known for their athleticism. So the metaphor of a race is sort of interesting.
I have to. I really think it's more of a physicist's revenge in some ways.
So the mathematicians think, well, gee, we'll just invent another algorithm that isn't subject to quantum attack. And there are some candidates, the most famous of which is something called lattice-based crypto. And there are 3 or 4 candidates of that. Google even came out with their proposal for a quantum-safe algorithm, which is built into Chrome. And something like 10% of Chrome connections use it by default. You don't know it's using it, but it's using it as a second layer. And it's out there, basically with people to try and break. It's, Google putting their foot forward and saying, we think this is a good idea, try breaking it, which is great, which is how we prove algorithms, let's face it.
Right.
The physicists, on the other hand, say, no. If you're going to fight, if you're going to defeat this stuff, you've got to fight fire with fire. You've got to fight quantum with quantum and actually use firing photons through space using lasers or through fiber to establish keys using purely photonic quantum effects. And the wonderful thing about quantum mechanics is, as soon as you measure it, I'm sure you remember your high school physics, as soon as you measure it, you change it, right? So the wonderful thing about quantum key exchange is if an eavesdropper listens into the connection somehow, you can detect that they've listened in and scrap that key and do it again. So you can prove that a key is only known to the 2 parties at either end of the connection. which is a great way of sharing keys, symmetric keys, which you then use to encrypt data in the normal way because symmetric keys are safe in quantum computing.
So to break this down, the problem you're really solving or attempting to solve is the key exchange problem.
That's right.
That is created as soon as public key cryptography is breakable.
That's right. Because that's what public key crypto is mostly used for in practical sense, is to share keys and establish shared secrets. Yeah. Using those secrets to then encrypt data, that carries on.
Right.
NSA says, you should double your key length, but fundamentally the algorithms are still safe. We don't quite know because we haven't got a quantum computer to test it with, but that's the philosophy. So, but the same issues still remain. You've still got to keep these keys secret.
I was going to ask that.
And they've still got to be random. The same problem,
Okay.
Most crypto attacks on stage through algorithmic attacks. They're made possible because of
steal the key.
Well, either crap implecation, people just make mistakes and don't patch stuff, which we've seen over and over again. Heartbleed's a great example. The bad guys are either going to steal keys or they're going to guess keys. If you're an insider, you'll try and steal, which is why we have things like hardware security modules to put these things in tamper-resistant boxes and all the rest of it. That's an insider attack, or you're going to try and guess the key. So, if you think about it, given that we spend, $200 billion a year on security software, we should be getting better at stopping people stealing keys. But because the bad guys every day can buy better and better computers and will one day buy a quantum computer, every day gets easier to guess a key.
Or they'll just break into really fast computers and use them.
But
that's not a
default password hasn't been changed.
Right, but that ain't a quantum attack. That's a traditional IT.
Right.
That's a traditional attack to steal a crypto secret. So we face the dilemma, I think, that we're doing more and more crypto. The days of just the most sensitive data being encrypted. These days, data breach disclosure laws, privacy laws. In Europe, we have this thing called GDPR, which is basically encrypt everything. More and more data is being encrypted. We're using longer and longer keys because NSA are telling us to. And yet we're running our crypto apps more often in virtualized environments, unmapping clouds, and worse still on IoT devices where we've got little tiny processors with almost no memory running on batteries, doing nothing for 99.9% of the day, and then having to spring to life and create this wonderfully encrypted connection. That's a tough ask for a gas meter to try and gather enough entropy to start making unbreakable crypto links. So we sort of see this point of conflict, right? We need more and more keys, better and better keys, more and more scrutiny, but we're doing stuff in places where there's less and less entropy. And that just gets amped up when quantum computers show up.
Let me second guess myself and ask you a question. I was saying that pure random wouldn't be breakable, but if it's of a set length, does it not then become solvable in most applications today?
Sure. I mean, if it's only a 2-bit key, there's only 4 combinations.
But even
so it
if
doesn't matter
it's,
you're right, how random
petabytes.
it is, you can just guess the key, like you were saying.
Right, you can just do a brute force attack. So so key lengths get longer and longer.
Right.
So when NSA 18 months or so ago came out and said you should worry about quantum computers, they said in the meantime you should go double all your key lengths just to be safe. So doubling key lengths has a massive impact on the number of potential combinations, unless it's not really random.
Or unless you're just giving out your key willy-nilly.
Well, unless someone can just steal it.
Yeah.
But if someone can just steal your keys, then chances are they can grab your data as well.
True. What we found in, I think one of the attacks we were talking about, Richard, when we spoke last was when you're developing software, it's increasingly more common for you to have to worry about essentially these cryptographic keys of some kind, right? And a lot of these manifest themselves in applications that have to share data, either with other local applications or with applications that sit out in the cloud. I need some kind of client secret. Client ID is my authentication. I have to, and that's not a cryptographic key, but that's my authentication mechanism. Maybe I want to take that and I want to encrypt that somewhere, which has the other layer that we've been discussing on top of that. How do we do that safely today when any given application could have a number of different keys that we have to store, that we have to encrypt the storage of them, and that we have to allow other applications access to those keys?
So the issue of key management is one of the hardest problems in enterprise security. You know, and unfortunately, it's one of the problems that nobody really owns.
And you're not really touching it with producing entropy-based random.
Right. So we're not managing keys. No, keys.
Right.
I don't want to touch keys. Keys are enterprise secrets. I don't want to. I'm helping systems make better keys.
Right.
You still need enterprise, organizational processes to manage these keys. Where they come from, how they're stored, how often do you change them, who gets access to them, what rights and privileges are associated with them. Right. So the days of there just being a handful of keys that you can keep on a floppy drive somewhere, that's long gone. Like you say, these days in an elastic virtualized world, you're changing keys all the time. You don't want to be embedding keys in code, so you've now got to be managing keys. You've got to be distributing keys.
Right. Not distributing them to GitHub, as we found. That's bad.
That's right. Not just posting to GitHub. So you've got this dilemma. The ops guys want the keys to be available everywhere, on every copy, whenever anything needs it. You set up a VM somewhere, it's got to have the keys to get access to its databases. They just want it to work. Website. Yeah. The security guys would like to have their keys, in lead-lined boxes, 10 feet underground, in the nuclear bunker that nobody can ever see. So neither of those two scenarios are viable on their own. So how do we build organizational systems to keep secrets that are unfortunately in use all over the universe all the time? That's the key problem. No pun intended.
But I think we're sort of dancing around. There's two fundamental applications of cryptography that we're talking about. One being the most common use, which is just simply getting on the web and going to a secure website and securing what we used to call transmission of data. And you're attempting to solve that or nip it in the bud before the public key issue of the key exchange for websites using certificates. It becomes a problem with the advent of quantum computing. But the idea of protecting data at rest, whole different topic. While it's significant, that's the tougher nut to crack, because the transmission thing we kind of get, and we're doing it now.
And that's the first thing to recognize. When anybody says key management, right? Every key is different. It's like it's like children management. Different rules apply to different kids. Yep. So some keys, like you say, So an encryption key used for an SSL connection, TLS connection. I still can't stop calling it SSL.
That's the protocol. Go ahead.
Right, these are ephemeral keys. They get generated per session. They might last for a millisecond and they're gone. There's not a lot of management going on there. Right. They of course need to be random, because they're the things that the Chinese are going to try and break. That's how you would eavesdrop an internet connection. So they're still going to be random, but it's not managed. It's not archived. Doesn't need to be recoverable.
Well, the key you use to create the server side
is the authentication key, absolutely. So again, that's so different things. So some keys are ephemeral, exist in two places, then are gone. Some keys are going to last for 10 years to identify some IoT device on a pole somewhere, doing its thing for 10 years. Is going to have some certificate, some private key built into it. That's a real key management problem. How do you establish the credibility of that key in the first place? How do you revoke it? How do you change it? Then as you mentioned, the other side of the argument is data at rest. Now I've got symmetric keys that might have to be around for 100 years, because I'm keeping some archived record or something in some database or some file system. Right. That's a key recovery problem. So when we think about asymmetric certificates, it's really all about validation. How do I know I can trust this thing for long periods of time? Right. Whereas data at rest isn't so much about trusting the key, it's about keeping the damn thing secret for a long period of time and to be able to recover it. Because in 30 years' time, when that tape drive's going to get decrypted, it'll be the person that did the encrypting and the place they stored their key is going to be long forgotten. So if you're not careful, key management ends up being a massive data scrambler.
Like you just ransomwared yourself.
You just ransomwared yourself, yeah.
And it should be obvious.
Or your successor.
But I've seen this too many times with my customers over the years. If you're saving data for a long time, make sure you need to save it for a long time. You need to be able to recover it. I mean, if you're going to store it, you have to have a business use to recover it. But I've seen too many customers that encrypt the data and spend lots of money to do it in different fancy ways, but they never really needed to keep the data in the first place.
And that was okay when it was just data, but now when it's encrypted data, now you've got a whole bunch of these weird things called keys, and most companies don't have key repositories set up. They don't have somebody that's responsible for all that. They have plenty of storage guys that are responsible for storing data. It's interesting when you use the term data protection to a storage person, it's all about availability.
Right.
Nothing whatever to do with security. Talk about data protection to the security person, it's all about privacy. So even the term data protection doesn't mean the same thing in two different departments.
Right.
So storage teams often don't have the ability or knowledge to go protect keys. So who's going to look after these things and who's going to associate them with this data in 25 years' time? So you're absolutely right. Store just what you need. But make sure you've got systems in place to look after the keys that relate to that data.
Well, and it's going to require companies to, and I've been speaking about this year in one of my talks, is sort of have an understanding of data classification and recognize that one solution, you can't afford to have one solution fits all and do the same thing for everything generally from a security perspective. But in particular from a data perspective, figure out what the data is that you want to keep for 100 years versus, I don't really care if anybody knows about this data an hour from now or a week from now or a month from now. But most companies that I go to that are required to do data classification, it's either unclassified, we don't care about it, or it's company confidential. It's binary. We protect it, and so we must protect it the way all the standards tell us to, or we don't care about it. But I think companies
so to err on the safe
more,
side, which bucket do you put data in? You're going to put it in the classified?
You put it in the classified. I don't know if it's
then you're not going to screw it up.
That's
so I think
and
I think the privacy privacy legislation that's coming out tends to motivate people to
figure out what they're doing.
Encrypt more stuff than they need to.
Yep.
Because in most of the data breach notification stuff, is encryption's a get out of jail card. It says if you encrypted this data, you don't have to tell people if you lose it. So there's a political benefit, if you like, marketing, branding benefit in using encryption, even in addition to the security benefits, which means you've got even more keys to worry about. So there are very few organizations that have a nominated role called a key manager, or even a functional piece of equipment called a key management system.
Right.
And that's a problem.
Yeah. A vault, as we've talked about before, is one of the common practices I've seen come into play when we talk about having, thousands of containers that all potentially need access to some type of key for something to get access to some sensitive data. Vaults are becoming more and more popular.
And then you get residency issues because you've got privacy laws that say actually the stuff for the Swedish data can't be encrypted by keys that ever left Sweden. So now you've got multiple vaults in multiple geographies because the provenance and geography of these keys becomes important, becomes regulated.
But now,
I was just
go ahead, Geoff.
Just one comment that I think we sort of touched on and sort of brushed over a little bit. The historical issue is going to be a huge one too. Richard, I think you started saying it, that not only do we have the key management issue in the present, but now we have the 25, 50, 100-year problem where somebody's going to want to recover some sort of data, and that thing has been protected by a key and perhaps an algorithm that is just completely unreachable at that point of recovery. So that it's a really multifaceted issue.
Or if you're rolling the keys over, do you re-encrypt all your archive data with the new key, or do you hang on to the old key?
And worse still, you're probably rolling the algorithm. In that period of time, we may go through 2 or 3 generations of crypto.
Right.
Yeah. So there's no point. Algorithms like DES, single DES, which can now be broken in a conference session.
My laptop could break single DES.
Well, it could till it got near me.
But I bet you there's still data sitting on a backup tape somewhere that's still encrypted with
I'm
single
hoping
DES.
the hard drive is still.
We're hoping
intact.
Jeff's data is still there.
So that becomes a big deal. Who's going to go re-encrypt all this data?
Yep.
With the new algorithms when they come out.
Yep.
But now entropy is still important, and important in a lot of applications. And I used to work for a lottery company, and I think there's no more shining use case than being able to have randomness. Now, in their case, it wasn't necessarily for encryption purposes, but they needed to have obviously a random number. And
provably so.
And some of the use cases, or some of the applications that were talked about amongst the engineers, were the lava lamp. And I was like, what? Well, hold on. What do you mean a lava lamp? And this was like 10 or 15 years ago. And they were like, no, basically one of the greatest random number generators, in their opinion, was you set up a room. They described it as a room full of lava lamps. You put some cameras on there, and the cameras capture the entropy in motion, literally. And I was like, well, that's kind of like theoretically pretty cool and stuff. And I'm like, are there lotteries that have like a whole back room full of lava lamps? Like, that's really awesome. But recently I saw this in practice, Cloudflare. And it was a wall, right? Is this a valid source of entropy? Is this what you've created? Is just rooms and walls full of lava lamps, Richard?
Well, we use
He laughs because the answer is yes.
we use quantum mechanics, so it's a little bit more sophisticated.
They shoot lasers through the lava lamp.
Yeah,
I see.
but it's dealing with the same issue. It's acknowledging the fact that computers don't do random stuff very well. So, is a lava lamp, perfectly quantum random? And of course it's not. But it's better than, it's better than nothing. So there have been plenty of stories of data centers using lava lamps, and horror stories where these things have been turned off by the cleaners at night because they think they don't need them anymore. And all your keys sort of go flatline.
Yes. It's like, why is there a mood lighting in the server room? That's weird.
That's ultimate social engineering, is pay the cleaners to turn off the lava lamps.
Yes.
So what?
Is there a certain number? Like, is there a number? Like, just one lava lamp isn't enough. You need multiple. The wall I saw was like 30 or 40 lava lamps.
I think the philosophy with entropy is the more the better.
Okay.
So entropy is one of these cool things. It's always additive, right? Even if you add crap entropy to good entropy, it's still better than good entropy. So the more lava lamps, the better, and the more different sorts of entropy sources, the better. You can't get enough entropy. And there's people who try to do manner of crazy stuff to find
That's a
entropy.
T-shirt right there. You just can't get enough entropy.
Yeah, it's true. It's very true, though.
Yeah.
I've been telling my wife that for years.
Because this is the problem with random. You can't prove it, or you can't easily prove it, because proving something is random is trying to prove a negative, right? You're trying to prove that there is no bias, and there's no pattern, there's no correlation, there's nothing in there that you could try and connect these bits together. If I gave you 1 billion bits, your odds of guessing the 1,000,000,000th bit should be 50-50. If they ever become better than 50-50, then there's something in the billion bits that have given you a clue. So perfect entropy would mean you'd have zero knowledge of that billionth bit or 100 billionth bit or billionth bit. That's when you got it. That's when you got perfect entropy.
Well, and how do you measure that?
Well,
like, what's the time length?
So this is the problem, right?
It's time. Like, why we could measure it for 100 years.
That's why it keeps getting longer and longer,
Right.
because you have to keep extending it beyond your ability to measure it.
Right.
So it's the same as proving the security of crypto algorithms. This is the reason why it takes 10 years, because you're trying to prove the negative. You're trying to prove that there is no flaw in the algorithm. So what do? You put it out there, wait 10 years, and if no one's broken it, you declare it safe. And it's the same with randomness. You put a block of data out there. You say, okay, here's 10 gigs. You've got 10 years. If at the end of the 10 years you still can't guess what the next bit is, then we declare it random. So there are statistical tests for measuring how mathematically random data is, which help. They can at least find obvious biases and stuff. But they still can't prove it's not predictable. So, for example, the number pi, right, the infinitely regressing number pi, passes all the tests of statistical randomness, but is entirely predictable. Would be an awful key, right? So, proving statistical...
Unless nobody knew you were using that key.
That's true.
Or where on the linear recursive sequence you were jumping in.
But boy, if they found that out, they could get you every time.
Yes.
That's the problem.
It's an elementary problem to fix if
And
you're
this
a
is-
math guy.
So this is the problem with randomness. So spotting the system that has the weak keys is very difficult. If you had two computers on the bench, one was backdoored with a weak random number generator and one that wasn't, you couldn't tell the difference between the two by looking at the outside, because all keys look equally random. So the only way you could do it is either by amassing a phenomenal amount of data and trying to correlate it, or by understanding how the damn thing works in the first place. So an attack that weakens the random number generator in many ways is the perfect attack, because the only person that knows it's weakened is the person that weakened it. And there have been horror stories over the years. Only a couple of years ago, NIST had to deprecate a random number algorithm because it had been concluded that the thing was weak, potentially even intentionally weak.
Interesting.
For the benefit of facilitating eavesdropping. So weak RNGs is something that are both the perfect attack and almost impossible to spot. So the way you can... poor randomness is not one of these things you can fix retrospectively, right? Because if we could generate a whole bunch of keys and pull out the less random ones and throw them away, life would be easy. But you can't do that. So you have to sort of architect it in at the front end to make sure there's enough entropy, which is why the lava lamps exist. You don't know you need a lava lamp, but if you do have a lava lamp, you know you're better off than if you weren't. If you didn't have one.
So how do the entropy generators work if you're not using lava lamps or some other such? Like, where do your sources of entropy come from for your solution and other solutions? Because there are USB-based hardware entropy generators. Like, how does that work?
Well, everything makes noise. A resistor, with a voltage applied across it will make a noise. There's thermal noise, so there's noise everywhere. The question is, as you were saying earlier, can it be manipulated? Can you change it by squirting radio waves at it? Does it change over time? Do these components age over time? Can they be manipulated by playing with the power rails? So there's lots of sources of randomness, and as you say, there have been $50 widgets on the market for 2 decades or so. The only true source of randomness, sort of provable randomness, is quantum mechanics.
Until we understand it better.
Cosmic radiation and the likes. So we're actually a spin out from the quantum lab at Los Alamos National Labs that have been working on this stuff for decades. And quantum entropy sources and quantum random number generators have been around for a while, but they've been slow. And if you've got a data center, with 1,000 VMs or 10,000 VMs that are trying to do a ton of SSL connections, you need an awful lot of entropy. You're generating, megabits per second of random numbers. So quantum's cool, but it's always been too slow. What Los Alamos managed to do was produce one that could generate, hundreds of megabits per second of perfect quantum numbers, and that's the thing we built and productized. And it actually uses photons. Looks at the characteristics of photons. Photons like to do this thing called photon bunching, and the degree to which you can get photons to do this bunching is a quantum mechanical effect, and you can measure it and digitize it and turn it into numbers real fast, and that's what we do.
And the photons do that in a very random fashion, obviously.
Yeah. It's a provably random quantum effect.
Josh got a comment in there.
Yep.
Yeah, that was sort of, I think Richard got to the place I was trying to get at too, and that is, what is your output? But I'll ask the question in a different way. What is the sort of perfection that you're seeking in the 5-year kind of 5 to 10 year horizon? I mean, are you, for example, looking to miniaturize the hardware module for random bit generation such that it can be put in IoT devices?
So we've actually adopted a slightly different approach. We've been trying to embed security devices into very low-cost things, phones and gas meters and VMs. People don't want to use hardware. People hate hardware these days. The whole point of virtualization is to get away from the hardware, right? We want to assume our stuff will run on anything. Doesn't matter where it is. That's the whole point of virtualization. So we deliver our entropy over the network. Almost like so you guys must have talked about network time protocol over the years. Same argument. You can't trust an individual machine, individual desktop, individual phone to know the time of day. We used to program our phones with the time of day, like our alarm clocks. Right. That doesn't work anymore. If you've got a
it's off by about 30 seconds.
Not good enough.
Nope.
So we don't. So we invented network time protocol to make sure everything agrees with the time of day, because we can't trust individual machines to know the time of day. So we went down the same path. We said, you know what? You can't trust individual machines and individual instance in a cloud somewhere to generate entropy. So you can either try and embed some piece of funky hardware into that platform, which is swimming against the tide, fundamentally, or you can deliver entropy over the network as a service. So entropy as a service, just like time as a service. So we have an entropy server in the data center with our quantum widget in the box, generating bazillions of bits of entropy, and we deliver it over the network. in many ways, like a boring background service. It's almost like a utility function in a data center. Your applications and your OS should, I think, in 5 years' time, will say, where's the entropy service? Hook up to the entropy service, and you're all set.
So you're distributing it over TLS?
Yeah, we use, yeah.
And that was going to be my question. Is the distribution of entropy in an encrypted channel or no?
So there's a chicken and egg situation there, obviously. Yeah.
Drops headset. But that's a distribution is a legitimate.
So that's right.
Problem.
So there has to be a protocol, obviously, for delivering entropy to a device that, in principle, has no entropy. Yeah. So there's an enrollment process, and we pre-deliver entropy to the system so that it can make that first connection, and then we cache entropy to secure follow-on connections.
Okay. So there's a somewhat manual or preliminary handshake that has to occur.
Well, you have to be able to trust you're talking to the right. To a trusted entropy server and not a backdoored entropy server or a malicious entropy server. So there's a trust relationship needs to be established in the first place anyway. So NIST have actually been working on a standard to do this. As we said, proving randomness is really tricky. So NIST have actually bitten the bullet and actually tried to define a standard for measuring entropy and certifying entropy sources and determining how you connect these things together to make true random number generators. So we can get away from pseudo-random number generators and have true random number generators, or non-deterministic random bit generators, as they call it. So there's a new standard coming out, and part of that standard enables network delivery of entropy as a boring background service, something that's just there. This is not meant to be something you manage actively. This is just something that happens over the network. Whether that's an IoT device or whether that's a VM up in Amazon or whatever.
Now, do you just have like one or two of these systems that exist on the cloud, or is it something that people would implement in their own environments, or a mixture?
So both. So we do have some in the cloud, and we run our own cloud service, Entropy as a service. If you want to find it, it's at getnetrandom.com. But I think a lot of if you're a bank, then you probably want your own entropy servers. Just like you could go to a public NTP server, or you could have your own private on-premise server. It really comes down to control and the degree to which you care about having your own entropy source. The moral equivalent of your own lava lamp in your own data center, in your own cage, managed by somebody you trust.
If you step inside that server rack, do you end up in like an alternate dimension or something? Like, are the laws of physics changed inside of that?
You can't really get into it. You kind of go right through it.
You just get sucked right through it.
It exists in the fourth dimension.
That's right.
It's like Doctor Who.
Yeah.
That's sort of thing, yeah.
Yeah, I've been biting my lip through this whole thing because I always tell people there's no such thing as pure random. So,
there is.
Quantum is challenging. Well, I think...
well, you still got to digitize it. You still got to put it through electronic circuits, which introduces some noise. So the physics of the photons is pure random. We get to about 99.6% random by the time we've digitized it.
It's not 100. Close enough.
My lawyers would never let me say it's perfectly random.
Well, the story I tell a lot is, I don't know how many, 3 or 4 years ago, I think it was at RSA, and I was just walking the vendor floor, and I spotted a booth, and they had something about, creating perfect random or super random or something like that. And I had to stop and talk to them. And this particular company was trying to produce random using lasers and entropy from a laser beam, and they were figuring out how to make it rack mountable and sell it. But they were, I started asking questions, and they pretty soon brought the physicist over to talk to me, and. What I was telling him was, back many years ago when I used to work for a government agency, we had this concept of super random, because when we were surveying, whatever sound waves, frequencies that were out there, trying to detect whether there was an actual man-made signal, a communication channel, and there was actually traffic that we cared about that we wanted to capture, we would do statistical analysis, and if the signal was too random, we knew it was machine generated, and therefore we were interested in it. And we called it super random, because random isn't 50-50, which I'm sure you understand. if you flip a coin 10 times, you're supposed to get 5 heads, 5 tails, but in reality, you get 6, 4, 7, 3, the occasional 10, 0. But over time, if you plot it out, you're approaching the 50-50. But actually getting 5 heads and 5 tails in 10 coin flips is actually an anomaly. It's actually pretty rare.
Sure.
Super random.
And getting that every time.
Right. Yeah.
Well, this is one of the problems with building an entropy source is a lot harder than just coming with the physics of the philosophy behind how the thing works. Because when do you determine the thing's broken?
Right.
Because electronics break,
Sure.
occasionally, even your laptop. So how many?
It didn't technically break.
So how many?
I'm not going to get a tour of the data center where the super random number generators exist, right?
Maybe if you're wearing a bubble suit.
Yeah.
So how many zeros would you let go by before you declare the thing stuck?
Right.
Right. So one of the this NIST standard has a health test where you watch the bits go by and you count the contiguous zeros and contiguous ones. Mm-hmm. And I forget the number. I think it's like 64 contiguous zeros or 64 ones is the failure state.
Right. It means someone turned the lava lamp off.
And in principle, that should happen like once every 1,000 years.
Well, or somebody dropped a cigar box on a lava lamp.
Should only happen once every 1,000 years.
Yeah.
In principle, you could turn the thing on and it would generate 1,000 zeros, and that'd be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very unlikely, but it would be okay. That would be a random number. So people's perceptions of randomness and what that actually means. And there have been even examples of random number generators where they have artificially prevented long strings of zeros from coming out because they don't look random.
Right.
Which of course is defeating the whole object.
Right.
People think
which is usually where they break and fall down and become solvable.
Right. Joff's got another comment in here.
Go, Joff.
Oh, well, just a couple of questions. I was just checking out Get.NET which was really cool. But it sort of tickles my math brain. But do you anticipate multiple large data centers running these quantum generators around the globe eventually? Is that kind of where you're heading?
No, I think we're this is not some crazy expensive solution. This is something, a couple of boxes in the corner of the data center. So I don't, there's not going to be 3 sources of entropy on the planet. No, this will be something that a bank would put into each of its data centers.
There's not going to be a tick and a tock entropy server out there.
No.
Okay.
No, I don't think so.
You're talking about the original NTP clients.
Servers, yeah.
Servers.
There you go.
Yeah, I remember. I was a system admin way back.
No, and if there were, you want to be again, even if it's a quantum source, it would still make sense to combine it. We don't say to anybody just use our source. Our source is just a supplementary feed. It's just like taking vitamins, right? Your body today might have just enough vitamin C, but you still take your vitamin C tablet just in case. So this is a supplement to make sure that you've got enough entropy. It's not about trying to prove that you don't have enough entropy. It's about saying, you know what, if you use this, you're all set. And it's meant to be sort of a boring thing in the background.
So, Richard, I have 5 somewhat pseudo-random questions, sort of random questions. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. Are you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
Sure.
3 words to describe yourself.
Goodness me. Old.
That's one.
Picky, I suppose. And
just a random third word.
Yeah, random.
Tuna.
Amoeba.
My joke on that, my random number generator was broken for many years, and then someone would ask me for a random word. It was always hot dog. Every time.
Well, there's a famous Dilbert cartoon which has a similar punchline.
Okay, so hot dog. I got it. If you were if you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice, or would it be completely random?
Photon torpedoes.
That sounds pretty cool.
That does sound pretty cool.
But it also sounds pretty expensive. I don't know. It's got to be. I'm an engineer, so it's got to be electrocution.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
No.
Or would it just be a random?
Yeah. I don't know. It would have to have something to do with cars, because I collect Alpha Romeos and I try to restore Alfa Romeos. So
Nice.
if you do Alphas, then you know about Rust, which I guess sort of gets me back to Entropy. So I don't know. Probably, I wish I'd never bought that rusty old wreck that I saw on bringatrailer.com.
Bringyourowntrailer.com. All right.
Bringatrailer.com.
Oh, bringatrailer.com.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby, do you prefer to go first or second?
I never heard of that game.
We'll
It's
let you
popular
go
in Europe.
European rules.
European rules, yeah. It's popular in Europe.
How'd you play it?
It's completely secret. We can't tell you that. Seemingly random rules.
We encrypted the rules with a key, and then we lost the key. We don't know how it's played.
So I never heard the game. What is it called again?
Ask Grabby Grabby. So
Ask Grabby
So
Grabby.
glad you asked.
Is that the same as Ask Grabby Grabby?
Yes.
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 Yeah, ask Grabby Grabby. There you go.
Yeah.
Jeff, you asked the question.
Richard, choose,
AskGrabbyGrabby.com.
There you go. He looks like a soccer player from my favourite team. Maybe the same guy.
Richard, choose two celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional or otherwise.
It's got to be, I don't know their names, but it's, what's the young kid in Breaking Bad and the
Jesse was his
Jesse
character on the show.
and his girlfriend with the long black hair?
Oh, the one that...
The one that overdosed.
Yeah.
Those two.
Whoa.
Really?
Okay.
I think that would be an awesome set of parents. That would be very cool.
Wow.
No shortage of random fun.
I think that'd be cool.
That has got to be one of the most unique answers I think we've ever heard. It is truly random.
It was truly random answer. Yes. Richard, thank you. Thank you very much for appearing on Paul Security Weekly. It was wonderful having you here.
You're welcome. It's great to see
discussion.
the studio from the other side.
Yes,
Fantastic.
absolutely. Thank you. With that, we'll take a short break, come back. Technical segment, then security news.